In a world where it seems totally normal to listen to a podcast about the Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos podcast.
Welcome to the X's and Argos podcast, brought to you by Funny Bone Broth, Ben Grant, along with JB, and this is your Week 4 edition of the X's and Argos podcast. We've got a huge week for you this week, a sudden bye week, so this kind of became our bye week podcast very suddenly, and we weren't even sure up until, I guess, yesterday for sure. We're going to talk about the breaking news with Commissioner Ambrosi suggesting that there may not be unvaccinated players allowed on charter flights, and we'll talk about the ramifications of that. The Argos made a couple transaction moves this week. We'll address those. Plus, Nick Arbuckle, your CFL Player of the Week with his huge performance. And both JB and I are going to give you our updated power rankings. All that and more coming up on this episode of the X's and Argos podcast. All right, JB, we're in a bye week. Suddenly, initial thoughts on this and how this all went down. What did you make of this whole thing?
It's unfortunate. I think I really would like to have played Edmonton and build on the momentum of the game. An early bye is not the end of the world. We certainly had lots of guys banged up. So, I'm not that twisted about it. I would like the game to be in Toronto when we finally do play it. But, it's disappointing, but I don't think that it's rises to the level of a crisis or an emergency, because I think the week off is perfectly fine for the team that had more than its share of injuries.
Yeah, this is a blessing in disguise in a way. I'm not a fan of early bye weeks, but I didn't really like the last week of the regular season being a bye week for the Argos, and that may change now. We've yet to see how the schedule is going to be changed to accommodate this rescheduled game, assuming they can do that. But in terms of this week, the Argos would have been without a number of key players, and I still think they probably had enough to beat Edmonton, but then you're going in maybe even more banged up than that against back-to-back Hamilton games. I think maybe this bye week is coming at a good time for the Argonauts. They can rest up, they can heal, get guys healthy, ready for that back-to-back with Hamilton. It puts them in a really nice position to play the Tiger Cats too, because their team's hurting as well. They've got a number of really significant injuries. Their line is a mess right now. And having an extra week to prep for them, being able to watch their game with Montreal, which is a pretty big game in the East, they could potentially be 0-3 heading into that back-to-back with the Argos. And like they were saying on the Fancast, that's not necessarily a good thing. There's a long history of 0-3. Well, it wouldn't be 0-3. There was even like an 0-8, 0-9 Hamilton team that beat the Argos on Labor Day. It often doesn't go well when the Tiger Cats are struggling, but I like the extra time for rest. Now, the bad, yeah, like you mentioned, we hope this game is rescheduled for Toronto, but there is a chance it won't. Listening to Commissioner Ambrosi talking to Dave Naylor on TSN the other day, he seemed to prefer it being played in Toronto, and certainly that's the most fair. But it's not as easy as it sounds. Even rescheduling the game alone isn't easy because there's only one team on a bye each week. It's not like other leagues where it's easier to fit in. In football, you can't play, back-to-back days or even, 3 days apart. And with only one team on a bye, it means that any movement is going to result in multiple moves. The best solution I could come up with involved moving 5 different games. There's no way to do it well. And unfortunately, none of these ways end up really punishing Edmonton. It's someone else who suffers for what has happened in Edmonton. I think that's probably the most frustrating thing.
I think the solution is simply a default. I think that it doesn't make any sense, because to stir up and totally flip the entire season on its head, to try and adjust for this game, because that presupposes that this will be the only time you will have to do that, and is clearly not going to be the only time. So I think that what you have to do is you just have to say that is a default, and we carry on with the schedule as planned. I don't think it makes any sense to go in and move teams around and change who's at home and who's not, and then have to do the same thing again in 2 weeks for another team. If another team had it, I'm sure they would just say that's a default because we can't do it again. So they should just come out and do that now. I think that's the play. I don't know why they're trying to pull off something that makes no sense.
It officially goes down as a 1-0 victory for the Argos in that case. But it's another issue, though, because neither team is over that 85% threshold. And so it means both teams end up losing their paycheck for the week, which is obviously something that the Toronto team doesn't want. Edmonton doesn't want that as well. So both clubs would really like to play this game in some way. I just think there are other options. If you can't play at BMO, and I know I've got a lot of questions this week, people asking, well, why can't this game be played at BMO? TFC doesn't play every day. How come, that's the other team sharing the field? It's because of the grass recovery time, and the agreement that the Argos have in place with TFC is such that you can't just play. It's not just the stadium turnaround, because that can be done. It takes time, but it can be done relatively quickly. It's the issue of the conditions of the grass. And if there were, for example, heavy rain prior to the Argos playing or something like that, the grass would be unplayable for several days for TFC. So there needs to be a buffer in there. And unfortunately, in almost every situation that would work quite well, in all of these like 10-day rest periods that the Argos have, there's a TFC game smack in the middle of it. So that's a huge inconvenience. But then my solution is then find somewhere else to play. Play at one of the OUA stadiums. I don't think Toronto fans would be too unhappy with traveling to almost anywhere in the OUA. But I think the one that makes the most sense would be to play at Varsity Stadium. I think that would be a great place for the game. And of course, there's history there. It used to be where the Argonauts play. There's some sort of cool throwback stuff you could do tied into that. But there are many solutions that I would try and go with prior to going to Edmonton.
I mean, I don't want to sound too unfeeling about it, but you need to get to 85%, and the players all knew that heading into the season. They knew that if they weren't at 85 as a team, that they were risking losing a paycheck. And I really think it's incumbent on the players to have their peers go get vaccinated, because otherwise you're risking a paycheck. This was all spelled out. It wasn't something they just came up with. The team knew it. The players who have not gotten vaccinated rolled the dice and didn't care. And I know it'll be very divisive within the team, but I don't see why having that policy is there if you're not going to use it for exactly this case. That is exactly why they put it in there, as a motivator to go get vaccinated, because otherwise you're putting your paycheck on the line. And unfortunately, it came up short for the Argos. I find it hard to be that sympathetic when this was the policy that was clearly stated. So that's really where I come down on it, is that they need to go get vaccinated. They know what the rules are, and this may happen again. And I think that the league is bending over backwards to be nice to them, but it's not where I come down.
Another thing that Commissioner Ambrosi said that I thought, and I don't always agree with everything he says, but I thought he had an interesting analogy. He talked about football being a sport where you are constantly doing something to protect those around you. It's a sport where you are protecting your quarterback, you're protecting the guy beside you, you're playing as a team, and it is sort of the ultimate team game, and that somebody's health and safety is dependent upon your knowing what you're doing and you doing the right thing. And if you sort of extend that and look at this on a bigger scale, he said this is the same thing. This is what we're asking for. We're asking for you to get vaccinated so that you can look out for the health and safety of your teammates. But it's also for the well-being of their families and their living, their livelihood. This is other people relying on you to do the right thing, and that is to get vaccinated. He was pretty strong with that. And I applaud that.
Exactly. Like, I'm not for taking the money out of anybody's pocket. I understand that. Like, I'm for paying the players, but the players know what the rule is and why it's in there, and it's in there to motivate them to go get shots. And they ignored it, and that leaves them in a precarious situation that I'm sure that they're upset at their teammates for putting them in, but then they need to have a players only meeting and and talk about this, or bring people in like the Minnesota Vikings did, bring in some experts to talk to the team, to answer questions. I think this is an opportunity to say, look, okay, maybe we're going to find a way to make this happen, but take this as a warning. Take this as, you don't want to lose a paycheck. We need to get this vaccination up.
If the game is played in Edmonton, we ran a poll this week among the fans trying to decide what the fair compensation would be for Argos fans. And so there were 4 options. Option 1, to rename Edmonton Little Toronto, and that would be permanent. So that'd be the Little Toronto Elks, which I think is really nice. Free beer all season, which was a very popular option. A grass practice field, which I thought was probably the most practical going forward. I do feel like, and we've discussed this before, I think the team would love to have a grass practice field. And then the 4th option was the rights to offensive lineman and left tackle Derek Dennis, which was the overwhelming majority. So that one received 51.4% of the popular vote, followed by free beer all season. So that is where the minds of the fans are. Now, most people said they want the game played in Toronto, but if they had to vote, that's what they want. Derek Dennis and free beer all season. I thought those are, all 4 of those are fine. I really like the Little Toronto, but obviously that's not going to happen. We'll transition now to, I guess, talking a little bit about the COVID measures with regards to flights. So this is something that Randy Ambrosi brought up with Dave Naylor. The idea that charters are not going to be exempt from having only vaccinated people traveling. Because I think there was an assumption that private flights, the chartered flights with teams traveling, to away games, would be exempt from this this change that's supposed to happen in the fall, where all air travel will be by people that are vaccinated. This presents a huge problem. If you can't travel unless you're vaccinated, there are a significant number of teams that are either not going to be able to field the team or not going to be able to field the team that you recognize, based on your regular roster. So that's a huge thing. Now, it's not as big for the Argos. They've only got one more road game coming up that isn't drivable. That's their game in Saskatchewan. Every other road game is Ottawa, Montreal, or Hamilton. But bigger picture, there's hopefully going to be playoffs and everything else. And really, that would be limiting. So if that is the case, if the government says, no, we're sticking with this rule, it doesn't matter if it's charter or not, you have to be vaccinated to fly, then there really aren't options at that point. Then you have to. And maybe that's the push that players who have not yet received the vaccine, maybe that's the push they need, because there's no getting around that. You're not driving to BC or Calgary or Winnipeg, depending on which team you are.
It's a question of, do you want to win? Do you want to cost your team a victory, or do you want to be part of the team win? It's a basic question asked of any athlete who plays any level of sport, but certainly at the professional level, if your eyes are on the Grey Cup, you should be willing to do anything to get there, and to draw the line at getting a medically approved vaccine while probably, doing all sorts of other things that are really hard on your body, to me just doesn't make any sense. And again, I would hope that the Argos will bring in some medical experts to tackle the questions that guys clearly must have about what this is, and bring somebody in with vaccines and kind of have it as a combination day.
It's great to see what a lot of the teams around the league are doing. 7 of 9 teams have now mandated vaccines amongst their fans going forwards, and I believe that the other 2 teams are in the process of finalizing that being Saskatchewan and Edmonton. So I believe shortly all 9 teams will only have vaccinated people in the stands. It's kind of ironic that everyone in the whole stadium will be vaccinated except for some players, but that's sort of where we're at right now. And again, Commissioner Ambrosi is saying that if he could mandate that, he would, but it's become an issue with the contract that they've got. Let's move on to some of the transactions that the Argos made this week. So there were 3 notable transactions. The biggest one is probably the signing of Trevon Tate. So he started for Hamilton at left tackle in week 1. He had a terrible game. and he was subsequently injured and now released. So I went back to look at Trevon's film from Memphis. That's where I began. And his college film is excellent. So he played right tackle as a freshman and then spent 3 seasons as a left tackle and got progressively better each season. He looked very coachable. By his senior year, he was an excellent left tackle. The only reason he didn't get NFL looks is he doesn't have the measurables. He's a shade under 6'3", which is, there are a lot of left tackles at that height in the CFL, but you just can't play tackle at that height in the NFL. They're not even going to look at you. So they took a look at him as a guard, and he's not a guard. You look at his play, he's never played guard in his life. He's a really good tackle, or at least he was at Memphis. But then I watched the week 1 game against Hamilton, and he really struggled. It was rough. It's going against Winnipeg, and we know how difficult that is, having seen back-to-back games against Winnipeg's D-line. But we didn't have any linemen that graded as poorly as Trevon Tate did in that week 1 loss to the Blue Bombers. So I'm not giving up hope. I see it there. The potential is there. He looks great at Memphis. I think he can turn into something. But it's going to take some time. And to me, it reminds me a little bit of Terry Poole and what he's going through. The moves that Trevon Tate was having trouble with, especially, we'll look at, the DNs of Winnipeg, but it was the sort of double move that was causing issue, that sort of burst of acceleration, a hesitation, and then re-acceleration. And he got beat on that every single time, or an out, in, and out, or an in, out, in. Those were tripping him up. And it was not great. And that's something that, like I said, that Poole's working on that. Tate will continue to work on that. I don't see him stepping in for Allen. He actually reminds me a lot of Allen when you watch his Memphis tape. It looks like Dejon Allen's tape in Hawaii. They both look like really nice, solid left tackles, but they have both struggled to a degree with the Canadian game. It's tough to come in and play right away. Allen has adjusted really well. He still needs to get better, but it's coming. And hopefully Tate and Poole can both push in that regard, and they can both improve. But they've shown the ability to be coachable, so fingers crossed on that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm excited about the offensive line pickup as well, and I think that sometimes guys join teams and there are changes at positional coach, and the new positional coach doesn't love what the guy brought that somebody else did who brought them in, and then it becomes untenable. So I think if the Hamilton offensive line coach was just not into whoever signed him in 2019 and whatever they saw, that could be a real steal for us.
And the corresponding move, offensive lineman Brendan Smith was released.
I think I don't think it's it's not game changing, but if you can get really sort of anything out of them, I'm all for churning the bottom of the roster. I'm all for adding 2 new people every week and churning those last spots to see if you can catch lightning.
JB, this week, Nick Arbuckle was named top CFL performer for week 3 with his 23 for 32 for 310-yard performance, a touchdown through the air and 1 on the ground. I was more impressed with the performance on my rewatch than initially watching the game. I thought he played great on the initial watch, and we talked about that in our post-game podcast. Rewatching it, I was really impressed with his decision-making. I love his RPO decision-making, and I really like the immediacy of him knowing where to go with the ball. It's shown through the limited time we've seen him. It's tough to play zone coverage against Arbuckle. He's extremely good at recognizing coverage instantly and knowing exactly what to do with it. And you ended up with Winnipeg playing a lot of cover 1, but he was making really good decisions there. He was finding good matchups. He was finding open receivers. His play action fake is really good. He used those RPOs well. So you ended up with Winnipeg defenders being at a disadvantage all day. I think he's very deserving of that honor. Not so much based on, the stats are great. You can't complain. It was an amazing day statistically, but he played even better than these stats suggest.
Yeah, I think we sang his praises. It's nice to see that the league agreed with us. It was a fantastic performance. Obviously, you want to see it repeated. But I have nothing but excitement, enthusiasm for where he's heading, because he looked great. I mean, still a couple things to work on, like we talked about. He still throws some dangerous balls, and looking at the game, he certainly is stronger to his right than he is his left. But yeah, I think it's nice to get a little recognition and for him to get a little juice and turn that into the Hamilton game.
So being on our first bye week means it is time for us to update our power rankings. JB, we were almost exactly the same last time. I imagine it's changed a little bit, but I'm curious to hear what you have. So why don't you give me your list, your power rankings, and then I will tell you what the correct power rankings are.
All right. Well, we can go. We can count our way down. Yeah.
All right, that sounds good. So we're starting at 9 for the created suspense.
Okay. I will go first. I have your Ottawa Red Blacks at number 9.
Yeah, I'm in agreement there. They are also my number 9. For number 8, I've got the Edmonton Elks.
Oh, okay. Interesting. At number 8, I have BC, simply because Edmonton beat BC. But I have BC. Their score, the score differential is not bad. Almost even, actually very similar to the Argos, and they did beat Calgary. So I thought about having them a little higher, but they lost to Edmonton, so I have BC at 8.
Yeah, I have a tough one with. I actually quite like BC. I think they look much better than I thought they would, and
pushed
then
Saskatchewan.
yeah, like they started very late, but and that was with like half of Michael Riley. So, it's sort of a weird one. I don't quite know what to do with them, but they've got moments where they look great. They've got some really good receivers. They've got great quarterback play. I don't mind their defense, although they do give up the home run every so often. But I've got them ranked a little higher than that. I understand why you've got them where you do, but yeah, I've got Edmonton at 8 to your BC at 8. Does that mean we both have Calgary at 7?
No.
Okay, all right. Well, I got Calgary at 7. Where's your 7?
I have Edmonton at 7.
Okay, I see what you've done. Okay, that makes sense then.
Yeah,
okay,
I have Edmonton at 7. Their score differential is not great. They're 20 points more given up. They've had 2 home games already. They lost to Ottawa. Come on, I can't. I know they dominated, but you can't lose to Ottawa at home. So that's number 7 for me.
And for 6, I've got BC.
Oh wow, I went back and forth on this a couple of times, but I had to go Hamilton here. I realized that they opened up against 2 of the stronger teams in the league on the road. But hey, man, 0-2, 14 and 49 score differential. I mean, as Bill Parcells said, you are what your record says. So there's only so much projection I'm willing to give the team from down the highway. So that is where I have them.
And I have trouble justifying Hamilton. They're my number 5, which is where we're going next. It's hard to justify. They're 0-2. They haven't looked good in either game. Their stats are not great. Their eye test isn't great either. You watch both of those games, and they just don't. They don't look like they belong.
They got crushed.
I know. And it wasn't like a misleading score or anything in either game. They really were dominated. Not in the first quarter. They played both first quarters fairly well, but they've got so much trouble on that O-line. And they can't put it together. I know they're starting Dane Evans this week, and maybe that will change things around, but I still don't. It's not going to help their pass protection.
I mean, their performance is akin to how I am crushing you with the correct power ranking.
I definitely go with mine over yours. Like mine are. I agree that mine are eye test power rankings. Yours are points for and against power rankings from the sound of things, and that's that's
I understand.
Fine,
there's always a quantifiable versus qualifiable, but okay, carry on.
All right, so you give me your number 4.
No, well, I haven't given you 5 yet.
Oh yeah, that's right. What is your 5? Well,
my number 5 is from Montreal, La Belle Province. I have Montreal at 5. They've had 2 away. They've only played 2 games. Both of them were away, so that's to be taken into account. They defeated Edmonton. They lost to Calgary in a pretty close game. Their score differential is nice, 52-43. I think Montreal. I actually went back and forth between 5 and 4. I think until we see what happens in Montreal Hamilton, I'm going to give them some credit.
Yeah, I like Montreal. I thought they looked amazing in their opener, and then just couldn't quite put a full game together in their second game. It's kind of a weird, but that's being on the road back to back is tough. We saw the impact of that with Toronto, and I think that's more what happened to Montreal. But they looked really good. So I've got Montreal as my number 4 team. And, that's where we are next. I love pretty much everything about their team in week 1. We'll just have to see which is the real Alouettes team. Is it the group we saw in week 1? Or is it the group we saw in week 2? Or is it what we saw in 2019 where you didn't really know what you were going to get? Sometimes they were amazing, and then sometimes you didn't know what was going on. What's your number 4, JB?
I have Calgary at 4, again, with the head-to-head over Montreal. I went back and forth on the two. Calgary's had 3 home games, so that's a strike against them that they're 1-2. Now, granted, they had a quarterback with a broken leg for a game, and that's not ideal. So I kind of chalked up that BC lost to playing with a one-legged quarterback, and now that they've transitioned to a dual-legged quarterback, they look like they're kind of back in pace as a kind of middle-of-the-table team. So I think Calgary is definitely there at 4. I think they're gonna they'll be a force. They've earned that respect.
I can't believe you've got them that high. I don't see that when I watch Calgary. I see a team that was lucky to have 1 win. I feel like they should really be 0-3, and I don't know. I don't know.
Their quarterback had a broken leg for a game and a half.
I know, but that, and yet he was still the best guy to put out there.
No, I think that now that they have a fully functional quarterback, you saw what they did. They beat Montreal.
Let's see with a week of film on him. Let's see what that looks like.
I expect Calgary to go on a bit of a run here.
On the road.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think Calgary's going to lose like their next 3 of 4, but we'll see. We'll see with our next power ranking update. I'm going to write this down here to make sure you eat your words. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like we've got the same top 3 teams. We'll have to see what order we've got them in. So for number 3, I have Winnipeg.
Yeah, same. I think that Winnipeg is a good team, and I think that they are very similar to Toronto. But I thought that Toronto really beat them solidly in the home game, and I think that all things being equal, I think Toronto is a better team than Winnipeg. So that's where I came down on that. I think Winnipeg is good, but I'd love to see Winnipeg play Calgary. But right now Winnipeg at 3.
I'm shocked at how easily Winnipeg seems to, or how easy it is to run on Winnipeg, or at least for the Argos it was. And I don't know, Hamilton struggled to run against them. And, what does that say about Hamilton? I don't know. Is it just that Toronto was that good at running the ball? I don't think so, because they couldn't move the ball on the ground against Calgary. But man, the Argos had their way with the ground game against Winnipeg for both games, even the loss. And so I think there are some real concerns in Winnipeg. I think there's some concerns on both sides of the ball, actually. There's still, I still got them as my number 3 team. They're a good team. They're well coached. There's no position they've got that's in trouble, but they just aren't, they don't have the flash that certainly Toronto or Saskatchewan have.
They're waiting on a couple of big guys to come back from injury. And, not having lost their kicker is a killer. I mean, they had, if not the best, probably, one of the top kickers in the league. And that's a huge loss at that position to have the Toronto cast off kicking. And, so when they get a few more guys back, I'm not concerned about Winnipeg.
So I assume you have Toronto then at number 2, same as me?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, right. We, looked good against Calgary on the road, held our own against Winnipeg on the road, dominated at home. I think Toronto has the potential to, when we get into talking about number 1, I think Toronto has the potential to be number 1. If they were to beat Hamilton, but we'll talk about one in a sec. But yeah, I think, I mean, we probably sound like homers here, but I think our cautious optimism has been proven, that we're not homers. Toronto looks good, and I think they're right there.
Yes. So Toronto, I don't think you can argue that Toronto's like, I would have trouble seeing them in any other spot than 2. I don't see how you could place, if you put Toronto somewhere else on this list, you're going to need a serious explanation to it. And I think the same with number 1. Saskatchewan is clearly the best team in the league right now. They're 3-0. JB, they're obviously your number 1 as well. We have the same 1, 2, and 3. They look excellent, but not unbeatable.
No, I mean, I have like a few raised eyebrows. Yes, I have Saskatchewan 1. They deserve to be. They have terrific score differential. They're 3-0, but they've played all 3 games at home, and they've defeated BC, Hamilton, and Ottawa. So not the gauntlet. I mean, I think that there is, they deserve to be number 1, but still a few questions to be answered. They haven't played on the road against a top 5 team yet. Well, except for you. Do you have Hamilton top 5 in your ridiculous poll?
I do, yes. They're my 5th team. They have to be. They'll be there at the end. Like I just like the Tiger Cats. No, but it's still, there's some degree of knowing, like, if it weren't, they would be in last place. They're the only team without a win in the league, but you don't have them in 9th. So to a degree, it is a future poll.
No, you're right. So I think Saskatchewan is very good, but let's see when they play Winnipeg. Let's see when they play Toronto. Let's see when they play a road game.
That's true. I'm excited for that Toronto-Saskatchewan game. I know we've got back-to-back Tiger Cats games, which I'm even more excited about. But that could shape up to be a really big game.
What a brutal 3 weeks, though.
It is tough, and that's why again this bye week is okay. It's coming maybe at a good time. So the skies have opened up here. I don't know how well you can hear the thunder and the rain just pounding down on my roof, but if you're wondering what those external noises are, that's exactly what's happening here. So we're going to wrap up today's podcast with some sad news, and that was the passing of Nick Volpe, an Argonauts legend. And it's one of those things, having been around the team as much as I have over like the last 20 years or so, I was someone that I never got a chance to meet, and he just sounds, from every account I've heard, just like the most wonderful man, and somebody that really is an Argos legend. So he played for the Boatmen from 1949 to 52, which, it's not the longest career ever, but it was everything he did after that too. Now his playing career was excellent. He won 2 Grey Cups in that time, including the 1950 Mud Bowl win over Winnipeg, a 13-0 game. He ended up contributing as the field goal kicker in both of those field goals in that Mud Bowl. And I think I read earlier this week that was the last time that there was a shutout in the Grey Cup, that 13-0 win over Winnipeg. Volpe then went on to work as a coach with the organization at various different levels. He was the head of Canadian scouting for a while. In all, his time in total with Toronto was 7-0 in Grey Cup games, which is just amazing. And like I said, from all accounts, was a wonderful man, and I really wish I'd had the chance to meet him, and I never did. So we'd like to extend our condolences to the family of Nick Volpe, Toronto Argonauts legend. Well, that will just about do it for us on this week's episode of the X's and Argos podcast. If you get time, make sure you check out our website. We've got a lot of great stuff there. I've got a film piece on DJ Foster, which I was really pleased with. There's an article on how John White was actually a huge contributor in last week's win over the Blue Bombers, even though it didn't show up on the stat sheet. Plus, you can find all of our usual things there as we start tuning ourselves up for the Labor Day Classic against the Hamilton Tiger Cats. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.